We're talking about Nazi Germany.
Our documentary is called Downfall, and it describes the last 100 days of World War II in detail with dates and events to mark the timeline. So, we're going to get right into it. The first date is February 12th, 1945, which is the death of President Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Oh yeah, Hitler rejoiced at that, and everybody else was obviously devastated, and America was grieving at that time. But for Hitler, this was a sign of great hope, and it was a way for him to twist the narrative in his own favor.
So Hitler and his propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, kind of viewed it as like an opportunity to plan a miracle attack to catch the Allies by surprise because of the death of their president. And they
he was a
viewed
loved
it.
president too.
Huh?
People loved him. He was charismatic. He was
Yes,
really like
he pulled them out of the Great Depression and everything. Like, they viewed him as a savior, and the death of that, Germany viewed that as a symbol of weakness and defeat in the Allies. So our next date is April 16th, 1945. I want to mention by this point, Nazi Germany was kind of in its downfall. The Allies, which includes the Soviet Union, the Americans, and the British, were already besieging them on two fronts. So the Russians were kind of closing in on the Eastern Front, and this was after D-Day in 1944. So America and Britain and their allies have already landed in France, and they're pushing Germany back basically from every direction. So on April 16th, the Red Army entrenches the Germans at Seelow Heights, which is outside of Berlin, I believe. Simultaneously, they begin to launch their attack on Berlin. The Americans coming from the west siege Leipzig, and the British begin their liberation of the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp.
Basically, this wasn't just scary for the people in the concentration camps, but it was scary for the soldiers as well. Something that this documentary does really well is consider everything from all points of view. And this specific event, it showed that the concentration camps weren't just scary for the victims of the Holocaust, but they were also scary for the people liberating them. That they got to see the atrocities committed in these camps, and I mean it's terrifying all around, having to be the person to set them free and imagining what would have happened if you didn't set them free.
I mean, the thing is, the Allies had always known about these camps. It's just seeing them for the first time really opened their eyes about the matter, and it was then that they decided Germany needs to be punished for what they did. Also, they gathered civilians from the nearby towns and villages, and they brought them to the camp so that they could see, and that's where the letter of that one woman was from.
Oh yes. Okay, so there was a letter described in the documentary where it was a woman, and she said that she had no idea that Germany was committing these things to the Jews, and she wrote to her husband. Mm-hmm. She wrote to her husband, and she said, "Is it true what they're doing to the Jews? Is it, I'm just wondering when this war will be over." And I think that coming back to the perspective thing, it just shows that a lot of times we see the Holocaust in World War II from the perspective of an American, from the perspective of the Allies, but it's like even the Germans knew that what was going on, it wasn't right. That was something insane.
And the thing is, they didn't even have a full knowledge of what was going on.
Yeah, because of the propaganda.
Once they were exposed to the horror, the propaganda glorified it. It made it seem like it was a necessary cause. But seeing it for yourself, seeing all those dead bodies, it was just a pile of bones because everybody was starving. So that truly horrified them.
I'm sure it must have been devastating to have had that ideology for so long and to realize that you've been fighting for inherently the wrong side the entire time.
Next day is April 20th, 1945. On this day, the U.S. liberates Nuremberg, and it's also Hitler's birthday. Nuremberg will be important later after World War II because of the Nuremberg trials. On April 23rd, 1945, the British advanced towards the German cities of Bremen and Hamburg. The Americans end up capturing Leipzig. The Red Army reaches the outskirts and the suburbs of Berlin. And one of Hitler's army leaders, Hermann Göring, sends a telegram to assume the leadership of Germany.
Right, so the telegram, that was a play for power, essentially, because Hitler, that was in the bunker, right? He was under 4 layers of concrete, no way to really communicate with the outside world, and this telegram was sent saying, you either relinquish your power or give it all to me if you don't respond to this telegram by 10 p.m. And well, Hitler didn't have a response because he wasn't given the means to give a response. And so essentially what happened was that what's the guy's name?
Goring.
Yeah, Goring was basically given freedom to, of decisions and free reign. And Hitler responded to that by being like, I don't support this, and I forbid you from doing anything that goes against it, and I'm basically considering it treason. But with no response, he had, in the eyes of others, relinquished his control.
He viewed this as one of the biggest betrayals towards the end of the war, because when things got rough, one of his top military commanders gave up on him, switched up on him. So yeah, he sent out for his arrest. He accused him of treason, and yeah.
I feel like it just kind of shows how devastating blind loyalty can be, because Hitler, with all of his dictatorship, he still did trust in some people, and that would have been the people at the top, and Goring was one of those that he really felt that was loyal to him and that he could trust. And this act of betrayal, it just showed that blind loyalty only leads to the deterioration of one state. It only leads to the deterioration of society, and I think that was the catalyst to just everything going downhill from there.
To just piggyback off of that, Goring was the head of the Luftwaffe, which was like the German Air Force. So he's the head of one of the three major branches in the German army. So he has a lot of power. It's not like he's not able to consolidate his power and basically take over Germany while Hitler's stuck in a bunker. But yeah, that really just highlighted the desperation and the struggle of even the top Nazis during that time.
Oh, and to just one more fact, it's that after this telegram was sent. Wait, I'm pretty sure that Hitler said that I don't give a shit because the war is lost anyway.
He declared that the war was lost.
Okay, so after this telegram was sent, Hitler also declared that I don't really care what you do, the war is lost anyway. And this almost in a way humanizes him to an extent. It shows that he wasn't just this, commandeering larger than life figure. It shows that he, at his core, was just a man who was grasping at his ideals. It showed that once, the rug was pulled under his feet, he was, floundering for control. One of his, in a way, his friends betrayed him, and
defeated.
It left him defeated.
Our next important date is April 25th, 1945. So the British destroyed Berghof, Hitler's mountain retreat, and it's also the same city that Goring ended up going to. The Red Army has completely surrounded Berlin, and the Americans and Soviets reached the German city of Torgau. What's important about this city is that they filmed their meeting.
Mm-hmm. So in a way, this painted the Allies in a glorified light, and it showed them in a way that the Germans had never portrayed themselves as before. The Germans, so far, the propaganda has said that they're leading this war, that they're gathering all this land, that they in a way have the best ideology. But this video, it was expository in a way. It was showing them in their true colors, and I think
this is the first video
this is the first
that was
video
ever put out.
Yeah. And I guess this kind of sets the stage for later when the Germans start to negotiate and they're almost basically shut down. It kind of just, it erases any circumstance of negotiations happening.
I mean, up to this point, it was kind of like everybody was fighting on their own part of the war, because Europe's a big continent. The Russians are far to the east, the Americans and the British are to the west. It's like nobody was really united, but all of them coming together glorified the Allies. It made them seem united. It brought them together to fight a common enemy, which was Germany.
Yeah, and I suppose that would also give them a flicker of hope, because now that they're united, they actually stand a chance against this, this large figure that they weren't able to grasp before.
Mm-hmm. Executed Mussolini. They hung his body by a rope, and all of the Italian civilians in Rome, they walked past his body and they spat on it.
As we just discussed, they switched up on freaking Mussolini, bro.
As a symbol of disrespect. So a little bit of history on this. In 1943, the Americans and British invaded Italy and took over basically the southern portion of it. And World War II it never went well for the Italians. So a few years in, they didn't want to fight anymore, and they ended up throwing Mussolini out of out of power. Like they launched a coup mostly.
And then Heinrich
Himmler.
Heinrich
Himmler.
All right, so Heinrich Himmler, he was Hitler's right-hand man. He was Hitler's right-hand man, and if Goering was a betrayal, Heinrich was devastation to Hitler. That was it for him. That was when Hitler decided once and for all that he's dying in the city, that there's no road that he can cross further after that, because for Heinrich to start negotiating, for him to backtrack on what they had previously decided, which was to fight the war to the end, it was basically betrayal at the furthest level.
It's also important to mention that he negotiated with the Western Front. At this point, it was better to surrender. Like, although surrendering was basically the last-ditch effort, it was better to surrender to the Americans than it was to surrender to the Russians, because of all the harm that they caused when invading Russia.
And at least with like American identity, we don't have like the torture and kill.
Yes,
kind of
but Russia, they would send you to Siberia, they'd make you work.
Yeah.
It was almost as bad as a concentration camp.
Inhumane.
Yeah, inhumane. April 29th, Hitler and his mistress Eva Braun get married. The liberation of Dachau concentration camp.
Okay, so Eva Braun is Hitler's mistress and one of the people that he trusted, thankfully, who hasn't betrayed him yet. She actually sticks by him. So Hitler had a handful of people that he trusted, and while he was in the bunker, he said that these trusted individuals have, the ability to leave if they so wished. And while some people did leave, Eva Braun wasn't one of those people, and she stuck by him. And I guess in a way, one of the themes throughout this documentary just shows blind loyalty and how that causes one's destruction. And I think she is the prime example of something like that occurring. For her to trust so fully in Hitler and to value his beliefs and value their ideology over her own life, it just kind of shows how far in they were into this delusion of grandeur and triumph. I guess it shows that they were going to see it through the end, even if it was going to kill them, and it did.
The next date is on April 30th, 1945. The next day, so the Wehrmacht, the German army, capitulates in Italy. The German city of Munich is captured, and most importantly, this is the day that Hitler and Eva Braun commit suicide. After their death, Grand Admiral Karl Donitz is named the president of Germany, with Joseph Goebbels, which was the German minister of propaganda, named the chancellor. The Wehrmacht losing in Italy just meant another loss on another front, so the Allies are coming in from the south now. And what's surprising is after the death of Hitler, they named Karl Donitz as the president, but they never really they never informed him of Hitler's death. And we're assuming that it's because if, let's say he knew about Hitler's death, he would have negotiated peace with the Allies. He would have taken the war in another direction, because Hitler had a lot of respect for him. He was the head of the Navy, and he was one of the people that never left Hitler in times of desperation. And
that's kind of crazy if you think about it, that even in death, he was affecting so many people's choices, that if they told him that this one man died, it would have changed the entire course of history. It just kind of shows how much control he had over people, even though he was just a human. And I think, again, circling back to the humanizing Hitler thing, that he was just essentially a power-hungry, dictator. All these people were blindly trusting in him, whether that be out of fear, out of loyalty. I guess it just kind of shows how human nature is just to blindly follow.
It's kind of important to highlight just how strong the Nazi ideology was, because even prior to World War II, Hitler was in power for over 12 years, and during that time he was able to just instill everything that he believed in into a whole country of people. He was able to rally millions and millions of people to fight and die for him.
Exactly. And I think in a way, because with his kids too, he was able to raise them from a young age and have them grow up under this ideology. It just kind of highlights, the idea of, if that's all you've ever known, that's all you're ever going to believe.
I mean, he started the Hitler Youth. He instilled, military and discipline into them from a young age, and it's partially what led to their success earlier on in the war, but later, they lost. All right, let's go. Our next date is May 1st, 1945. This was the Soviet Union's International Day of Labor. The Soviet flag was raised over the Reichstag, which is the German Capitol building. German Minister of Propaganda Joseph Goebbels committed suicide, and Adolf Hitler's death was announced to the public.
Okay, so Hitler dying was kept mostly a secret so his forces could keep fighting, and the person that took over after him, he had no idea that he died, essentially. And it's almost showing how people are so like blindly devoted to a cause that they would keep their own ringleader's death a secret so that they could keep on continuing, that their ideologies were so important to them that it doesn't matter that the person who brought them together died, that they would keep fighting for that cause regardless.
It was kind of like Hitler was like the embodiment of like the Nazis, so they had to make sure that the people didn't know that he was dead, so they would keep on fighting.
Exactly, because when your symbol dies, there are a lot
nothing left
weaker.
to fight for.
Exactly.
Yeah. And for the Soviet International Day of Labor, they were at this time they were like still fighting throughout Berlin, the city, but Stalin kind of wanted it to be like he wanted the city captured by this day, so they were kind of in like a rush. And on that day, that's where like that famous I don't know if you've seen it, that famous picture of like they're waving the flag over a building over Berlin, like the communist flag. They waved that because their generals were like, okay, we need to send a picture to Stalin and be like, yeah, we conquered Berlin. So it was kind of like a race to get to that city. Our next day is May 2nd, 1945, one day after the Soviet International Day of Labor. On this day, Berlin surrenders. A few days later, on May 6th, Pilsen, Czech is liberated and the Wehrmacht capitulates in the German southern territories and in Denmark.
So Berlin surrendering was the start of Hitler's reign starting to end. The capital giving up is I'm gonna edit that part out.
Symbolizes the end of Germany.
Yes. Let's just keep that in. Okay.
I feel like we could see a correlation here because, a few days after the capital falls, other German-held territories like in Czech surrenders, the south and Denmark. So it's kind of related to how, after Hitler dies, everybody stops fighting. After Berlin falls, the rest of the cities fall as well. On May 7th, 1945, Alfred Jodl, one of Germany's top commanders, negotiates a unconditional surrender with the Allies. On May 8th, 1945, Hermann Göring, the head of the Luftwaffe who, betrayed Hitler, was captured. Karl Donitz, the new president of Germany, announces the end of the war, and World War II comes to an end at 11 p.m. Central European time.
And that brings us to the end of the documentary. Okay, so what did you think about it?
I thought it was a very unique perspective. I thought it provided new insights on, not just Allied views, but also how it was for the Germans.
Yeah, I think it did a good job of almost, like I said before, almost humanizing Hitler in a way that, explained his perspective and how, why exactly it all fell apart for him. I think they did a good job of that.
Because, this documentary included,
his personal life, for one.
His personal life. It included, personal anecdotes, kind of. We saw that letter from the lady.
And relationships. Showed how, the betrayals affected him in a way.
Yeah, it kind of just gave us a bigger insight. The editing, the way that it was structured was pretty good as well, because it gave us, I felt like it was good with the timeline. It allowed us to see everything
for sure
as it happened.
Yeah, the chronological order helped. So I think, for the documentary, the message of it, I feel like it took me a while to kind of figure it out, but I think it just showed that how far blind loyalty to just one person or one ideology takes you, and that's not very far. What do you think the main message is?
I feel like the message is these are still people, we view Nazi Germany as like a dictatorship and a tyrannical country, but these last 100 days where they were struggling in desperation, they were kind of just fighting for their life. It wasn't even fighting to win, they were just fighting to survive. It, as you said, it humanized them.
Yeah, especially the citizens. I think if we think back to that like lady with the letter, the people that were, you know, liberating others in the camps, like everybody from every perspective was going through a lot. And it just kind of shows that no one side was like in the right or wrong. Like both of them did wrongs. I mean, obviously one side did a little more wrong than the other, but it just shows that in the end, like these were all people that really struggled a lot to the very end.
Like I feel like I can't even understand how overwhelmed they must have felt. Like they're in charge of a country that's falling apart, and you know, like, because they need to navigate through the needs of their country as well as, you know, like their own lives. Like if you get captured, you're gonna die.
Exactly.
So
okay, so let's hope that this isn't on the AP essay with themes to support, but if it was, I'd say, okay, at first I thought that it would be morality and ethics, but he brought up a good point of it being about adversity.
I was thinking, you know, Nazi Germany in general, if that were to be the AP prompt by itself, that would probably be about, you know, morality, the stuff that they did wrong. But this documentary is more about the crumble of their empire and like their downfall. So I would say that this leans more towards adversity.
Yeah.
The struggles that they faced.
So it's like everybody struggled. And if it were to be used as evidence, I mean, there are a lot of things we could say. You know, Hitler faced adversity. Hitler faced adversity by, you know, locking himself in the bunker, and his like personal people like going against him, like sending the telegram, for example, and being like, we need a response by 10 p.m. and, you know, he's not able to give a response. And what else? You know, them trying to negotiate while they're still fighting and not being able to negotiate. The people in the concentration camps obviously also faced adversity. Yeah, what do you think? What else?
I think, well, honestly, I think that this documentary just wouldn't be that suited for an AP prompt, because it was kind of like an information overload. I could see it being like a synthesis prompt, but for like, you know, like a rhetorical analysis, there's not really anything to analyze, you know, because it was just kind of, they were telling us about what happened. It wasn't really...
Yeah, it's informational, but I guess in a way it's also giving you a deeper look into like Hitler's psyche and like everybody else's too. So if you were to rhetorically analyze it, you could analyze his like personal motives, I guess. Like it could be like analyze Hitler's personal motives and from like what he says.
Or like, you know, how the documentary does that, like through the editing, like the music, like they play classical.
Oh yeah, the music especially. Oh, the music was like all mostly instrumental.
It was like a
marching
mix, like,
almost.
It was like a mix of, like ominous music, but it was also like kind of like...
It was scary. It had my heart beating like real fast. Had me sweating.
It was like kind of suspenseful.
But it also went quiet at some times. Like I remember at one point in the documentary where it was, when it was talking about the people in concentration camps, the music just cut out entirely. It was just
because it's like when they want to emphasize a point,
it just goes silent.
We're breaking it down right now. If they wanted to emphasize a point, they would like cut out the music.
Exactly.
So our main focus would just be on the. Interviewed Sankei Nitzel, who is an author that's dedicated his career about the Second World War through his book, you know, Soldaten. He has probably one of the deepest knowledges about World War II and about Hitler of, you know, many historians. And his status as a professor, I would say that encourages the audience to like believe his authority and to, you know, take his words with weight. As an educator, all right, we're cutting that part out. We didn't that part.
So I guess in a way it kind of focuses mostly on education. Even just having like a professor speak for it, because a lot of documentaries, I mean, they have like first-hand accounts and stuff like that, but having a professor narrate the things that happened, it kind of just shows like an unbiased opinion. So like the viewers basically able to form their own opinion on the events that went down, and they're able to get this information without having any previous bias towards it.
And it's not like this documentary didn't have first-hand accounts. Like they did. They had people that lived through this and that experienced this.
It just strengthens
the
their
credibility.
Their credibility.
Cut out all of my does and just leave the last one. The credibility.
No, I'm gonna keep all of them in.
The documentary.
I'm gonna keep every single one. All right. Oh, that could be one of the prompts. It could. Is education a prompt?
Education. It would lean towards more like credibility, right?
No, because there's adversity, there's creativity. Like, is education like an overall like an umbrella?
Adversity, creativity, cunningness, inequality, change.
Yeah, so it's like
cunningness.
Oh, it could also be inequality. This documentary.
Inequality.
Inequality and cunningness, because Hitler and like his inner circle, even like they were all cunning at some point in time.
Right, because they got to that point.
Exactly. And for them, if for the Soviet Union to be able to beat Hitler's army, they had to be a little bit cunning on their own. Like, it's not like they played everything by like the books or by the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then what was the other one?
Inequality, cunningness.
Inequality is the obvious.
Creativity.
Creativity. You could say they got creative with their plans, but not really.
Change. Oh, change. Change. Because if it weren't for change, the Germans would have probably won the war. You know,
Yeah.
because stuff happened, battles were lost, plans were ruined, and that's why that they lost. And towards the end of the war, Hitler kind of grew. He kind of became like psychotic. So like all of his generals' plans,
So it could be a personal change.
he began to like intervene in them, and he basically like micromanaged everything that his generals were doing.
Right.
In like throughout the whole country, so that kind of like it centralized his power. He made like his decisions were being made for the country, but then like now we see where that got him. You know. Like,
oh wait, you said that he micromanaged. That brings us to our question. Why did Hitler not intervene early when his generals were losing again and again? That was our question. The only thing that the documentary didn't exactly like go on, but of course they're not. You know, they're not.
I would say that's not answerable. Honestly,
that's really not.
It's kind of just a question, like in general. Like you could ask that.
I guess you could speculate.
To anything, yeah. I think it was Hitler. At least what I think is he got so in his head about his like first successes. Because honestly,
once you're that successful, a few losses don't really matter.
Right, but to begin the war, you know, he took over France. He took over half of Russia. So those are his like military successes, but I would say that he let that get to his head. He like lost trust for his generals, and he wanted to take over. But clearly we could see he was not as great as he thought he was because they lost the war.
Berlin surrendering is sort of this. All right, so Berlin.
Have you seen like the clips, like the Suits bloopers, and they're like in fire? Like I feel like that's some BS.
What did he used to say?
What do you mean?
It's like,
Ghana?
I'm the best loser in New York City.
Life is this. I like this.
You're not doing it right. You have to have a swagger. Life is
like
this.
I
like this.
That's going in the bloopers.
All right. Mm-hmm. And then May 6th, when the liberation happens and the capitulation happens.
I just said that, bro. Oh my god.
I zoned out. Not gonna.
Alright.
You'd be talking to talk.
Cut it out. Cut it out.
That was so snarky. He's not as great as he thought he was.
Wasn't that good?
Yeah, obviously, I would hope not. But yeah, I guess he covered everything. Is that it?